Hello and welcome everyone to Bounce Off, the #1 SlamBall podcast worldwide. I am your host Sam Roberts. You can find me on social media at Quantum Roberts. That's QUANTUM Roberts on Instagram, X and TikTok. Today is going to be a quick episode more than anything because I needed sleep this morning. It has been killer staying up with this league all week. Secondly, as you might already be able to notice, I've got hiccups to start the day. That's fun, but today's headlines are: the Mob maintain their momentum, the Gryphs keep their playoff hopes alive, Bryan Bell-Anderson has a breakout game, and the Lava make it tough on the first seed. That is all coming out of last night's action, the first night of the last week of SlamBall action for this first season back on ESPN. Exciting. First season back in the US, first season on ESPN. Those are those hiccups we were talking about. We start with the first game of the night, and as always, SlamBall... Oh, Jesus, the hiccups are going to suck. As always, SlamBall fans, we're going to be taking it game by game, and this is going to be spoilers if you've not watched the matches yet. I will be talking about scores. This is a recap from last night's action and what I'm seeing looking at the game. So game one, Jesus, last night, Lava versus Mob. The Lava coming off their first win of the season last weekend, which led into their second win of the season and their first main event win. Now taking on the only team they hadn't played yet this year in the Mob, who were the undefeated 12-0 team going into last night. And the Mob pull away with a 47-32 win. This was their second lowest score for the Mob all season, and their second lowest point differential in a win as well, with 15 points. Both of those, the actual firsts were in a win over the Griffins on Thursday, 27th of July, which I believe was 43, and it was a 13-point win. So I think it was 43-30. That's the lowest score the Mob have played so far this year. For the Lava, we'll start with them, and then we'll talk about what the Mob did to win this game a little bit, right? Or more likely we'll talk about the Mob later because they're going to be in the main event, but we'll talk about what the Lava did first off. So, those stats are good. Second lowest points, the second lowest point differential is a good sign for this team. And the Lava looked really good early on. Faisal Shafat is still an excellent stopper on pretty much everything thrown at him, right? If it is a single man drive or if it is a single cut off the island, he can deal with pretty much 90% of that, right? Which I've been saying for the long time is what you need, right? The Mob's timing was a little bit out early on, and that is partly due to just Fessy being scary underneath the basket. And you cannot go at him one-on-one or he will get a very easy block. The Lava offense on top of that was very comfortable early. Paxton Henry facilitating from the island, occasionally shooting. And then Bryce Moraine with his first full game back without a minutes restriction, being another option off the island, throwing single cut passes to Joshua Shannon. And then when that started to become obvious after two straight plays, the next option was faking that pass and instead throwing a stack cut to Jihad Shockley, who was coming over the top for a dunk on Gage Smith. Gage Smith can't be beat one-on-one, same as Faisal Shafat. If you go straight at him, he's going to get a stop. The other thing that the best stoppers do is disrupt your bounce in the bottom tramp with timing their jump in order to stop guys who get into the bottom tramp from being able to get the height that they want, right? And that was something that Gage Smith can do really well. And so this offensive strategy of the cuts coming from the side tramps to the top tramp meant that he wasn't able to be disruptive. And if there were two different cuts happening or more, it meant that he had to honor the ball, then honor the first cut, and then the second cut was coming. And that was immediately harder to deal with. So this was a good strategy early on. And it led to a 21-18 lead for the Lava at halftime. Darius Clark of the Mob had 15 of their 18 points. And the thing that the commentary was pointing out is the biggest switch or change in momentum was the loose ball recoveries. There were 16 for the Lava versus 8 for the Mob, clearly meaning that they were just going after loose balls more. They were trying to get more opportunities, more bites of the apple, more scores. The problem with that comfortable offense and that strong defense is maintaining that momentum as the game goes on, right? Lava spent an entire shot clock doing nothing in the third quarter, right? They were up 27 to 26 with 2 minutes left in the third. Were they trying to kill the clock? Were they trying to take some time out of this thing so that they could easily beat the Mob by just maintaining this lead and cutting out time? The problem is the Mob can score an awful lot very fast, and I think it's better to just keep your foot on their neck, especially because this section where they just spent, it was 20 seconds of shot clock, and it ended with Faisal Shafat dribbling around the top of the island and taking a bad 3 off 1 foot. Because there was zero movement from the guys inside the tram. And if you're going to play your stopper that high, you want the other guys to be moving around so that he can make a pass, right? So that was a bad sign. And that showed that they were too comfortable with that 1 point lead. They should have been going harder to try and get a win rather than just holding on to that positioning. They were comfortable, but you need to maintain your momentum to stay comfortable, and that it requires maintaining a lead, because as soon as things stopped going the Lava's way, they didn't have that poise in the moment that they had done in last weekend's games, where they went up a lot early on and then were able to maintain that lead with a comfortable offense, poise under pressure. Now they were fighting for a win, and they don't necessarily do very well in those situations of maintaining an offensive strategy when they're just trying to fight to get out of this game with a win. I think that they could cause problems for the Mob. They just need to keep their pedal on the attack and stay inside the tramps rather than shooting from outside, and not in that bottom tramp but coming off the sides, wing cuts and stack cuts and drives from the top. All of this stuff, right? They could be a problem. They could hassle the Mob. We talked about it on This Week in SlamBall. But what is most important for them now is that they need to get into the playoffs, which might be hard with a loss here, and the fact that the Ozone and Rumble, depending on how they play going forward. So we shall see. But this is encouraging for a Lava team that struggled a bit this year. I mean, a bit is maybe an understatement. How good they did in their main event win last Sunday may have changed a lot of perspectives on this team. But the reality is they were not playing well up until last weekend. They were playing close, that's not fair. They were playing well, they just weren't executing. And now they're showing that they can execute, just not in close games. They need to jump out to an early lead, and then they can execute from there. A little bit of late game drama in this one. Mob are up at this point. They are up by a reasonable amount, and there's a foul away from the ball. Jihad Shockley and Cam Hollins are shoving each other, which ends with them falling into the tramps, and one of them takes exception to it. All the players come over and need to get separated. Holloway's jawing with guys. Cam Hollins ends up standing on the table shouting at the crowd like, yeah, come on. It creates a face-off. Cam Hollins wins that face-off on the offensive end, and then does not shut up, just going at Jihad Shockley, barking at him, shouting at him, screaming at him constantly. And that's your right if you dunk on a guy, but it's a lot of energy. On the reset, so Mob get the ball back after scoring on a face-off, and sorry, Lava get the ball back later on. That cannot be the same possession, because if that is the case, then the Mob should have got possession of the ball for that. But regardless... Oh, sorry, that was wrong of me. Cam Hollins got a block on Jihad Shockley's offensive face-off, and then he wouldn't stop barking. Lava got the ball back, and on the reset, Holloway gets wiped out by Faisal Shafat, screaming in from the side for like a tackle block screen thing. Like, I don't know what you'd call it in SlamBall, but on the offense you can sort of take away the defensive player by almost tackling them, but in a safer manner. And this is one of those questionable ones where Shafat came in with so much energy and explosiveness that he wiped out Holloway. And the argument is, was that a foul? I think that called for a foul, and I think what happened there was because Holloway wasn't paying attention to the play. He was still talking to referee Rob Wilson, and Rob Wilson was still sort of half-handing the ball to Bryce Moraine, who's taking the inbound play. Excuse me with these hiccups again. And Moraine notices Faisal Shafat coming in at the last second and just snatches the ball away because he realises either this is going to be a flagrant foul or I had to take the ball now. And so I think that might be where the foul came from, is that it was before a play had started. Anyway, things get chippy between Dion Bailey and other players. Bailey is the assistant coach for the Lava, and basically what happens in this situation is Moraine gets past the play because of this tackle thing. Brandon Simpson from the Mob kind of like tackles him late, pushes him into the tramps, and Dion Bailey took exception to that and started having a go at Brandon Simpson. That's what caused a bunch of guys to come out on the floor. Holloway and Shafat were sort of like not fully dapping each other up, but they were sort of being like, that's fine, man, it's cool, we know what's going on here. But that was, Holloway and or Simpson and Bailey was the thing. And then as soon as the game's done, Brendan Kirsch comes over, he's doing the high fives going in the line, and he gets to Dion Bailey, and you can hear it on the broadcast. He basically says to him, yeah, but he had his elbows up all game. I was watching it. So he's like going to Bailey and being like, yeah, whatever, but you guys have been fouling all game. You've been breaking the rules all game, or whatever it might be. And Bailey just kind of shrugs it off and tries to go back down the handshake line. So the Mob are ruffling everyone's feathers right now. They settled into their offense late in this game. They go up by 15 with about a minute 30 left, end with a 13-point... No, with that 15-point lead. They don't like run a final offensive possession with their last shot clock. They just let it run out, which would be like the ultimate scumbag move to try and score on the last shot clock in sports when you're already up by a lot. You just kind of leave it be. You score when like it would be a violation, because in SlamBall at least they're also getting told that by the refs, but in this particular situation they just kind of let it run out. Mob are ruffling a lot of feathers, and they have a right to, because they've been so dominant. Commentary says in the next game that they've had 9 wins by 20 or more points and 6 wins by 30 or more points out of their, so 6 of their 13 wins going into the main event had been 30 plus. That's almost 50% of their games is won by 30 plus points, which is crazy, crazy, crazy. So maybe they have a right to be cocky and rubbing people's faces in it. Certainly have more of a right to do that than other teams who act in a similar fashion. But you worry about how that's going to rub other teams and what they're going to bring in the playoffs. And maybe the Mob don't worry. The Mob answer is, right, then you beat us. That's the whole point, right? We think the only people that can beat us are us, and you having your best game of your life. So come and have that best game and prove what you're worth. And so the Mob are playing with other teams. And why shouldn't they? That's their right. In terms of the last thing about the Lava, they were looking really good early on, really good at one point. Bringing Faisal Shafat up a lot to be part of the offense in different ways can be tiring. To have him setting several screens and getting really physical, probably exhaust you on the defensive end well. The added part to why the Mob jumped out to a lead, their perimeter defense looked to heighten during the second half of this game. There was a lot of stops, stopping guys getting to the island in the first place. But then, regardless if they made it there or not, there was a lot of perimeter defense on the cuts that would be coming in from guys who would be driving from the side or driving from the top. They were just getting in the way and being physical and stopping guys getting, disrupting. Disrupting is the word. So it's not fouling, it's not hitting them, but it's getting in the way so that when they get into the tramps, it's not with the momentum they want. The timing's thrown off a little bit. It just makes it a little bit harder. So that's where the offensive scoring came from. The Mob's improved defense. It's not just that they're scoring. There's improved defense for this team as well when they need to win. Second game of the night, much closer, incredibly exciting game. Griffins beat the Ozone at 76-66. I said much closer. That scoreline does not accurately reflect how close this was. It's another example of the make it break it rule kind of making teams look silly at the end of games, which is not the Ozone's fault. It just didn't work out for them in this case. But I think, I've said this before, I think the make it break it needs to be extended to 30 seconds. The last 30 seconds of the game. If you don't know what make it break it is, in SlamBall you have what's called a face-off, which is a one-on-one guy dunking versus guy trying to block him, and that occurs during the first foul of each quarter. But once you get to the last 20 seconds of the game, any foul creates a face-off. I think it should be 30 seconds. And I think that you should only do it when you're within 5, which is smart because that's what the Ozone were here when it was 70 to 66 with 18 seconds left when they foul for the first time, creating a face-off. Unfortunately for them, Q Cotton messes up on the defensive end and enters the Tramps ahead of the offensive player, so automatically the Gryphs get the points for that. At that point, you're now down by 7 rather than 4. Is it worth still trying to make it break it when you've now got, less than 20 seconds? I don't think so. I think you need to break it on that first attempt or else that's game. But they foul anyway, and Justin Holmes, who has had how many? I think, I without looking up, I think he had 3 face-offs in this game because they start talking about how he's not missed a face-off yet. And by the end of the night, he is 14 of 14 on the season, which is the best in the league, 100% make on offensive face-offs. And so that's what finally ends the game for the Ozone. But it was way closer than 76-66 would suggest. Massive 27-point fourth quarter from the Gryphs is what put them up in this one. Ozone were leading for the rest of the game prior to that. And so this was like a big last-minute heave from the Gryphs to put them up. On the Ozone side of things, I specifically want to shout out Bryan Bell-Anderson because I was harsh on him in week 1 and I got called out for this on Twitter. But as I will point out, I was harsh on him in week 1 and then every week since then I've said that he's improving. And this was very much a coming out game for BBA. 30 points on 10 of 11 at rim attacks, and the one that he missed, he got very high and then just clanged off the back of the rim, which is unfortunate. But so improved. So comfortable going at the stopper one-on-one. So much more comfortable taking it himself into the bottom tramp and freestyling around the top and bottom and moving around the trampolines to get his own baskets off. So much just poise there to get those 30 points. Whether it's doing it on his own or as the secondary cutter screaming into the tramps from the top. With all of these things, it was like much improved versus like earlier games this season. I will say I would like to see him do it against a stopper that isn't Matthew Wilkerson, who's the backup stopper for the Gryphs. Connor Hollenbeck still out this game, probably this weekend with an ankle injury of some sort. So no Hollenbeck, but there was Wilkerson. And Wilkerson's big and physical, but he's not a great first option. And so I'd like to see BBA score this much against a better stopper, because we'll get into it in a second, but he was, the Gryphs winning this game, I think, comes down to tiredness for the other team's stopper, perhaps, rather than their own stopper being excellent. So, Keenan Love, I think, maybe got gassed at the end. The Ozone all season have been playing a strategy where Keenan Love plays the first quarter at stopper, then Vincent Bowman plays the second, then Keenan Love plays the third, Bowman plays most of the fourth, and then Love finishes out games if it's tight. And in this game, Love basically played 18 and a half of the 20 minutes of game time. I think it was close to that, right? Bowman was barely on the court. And so this is the first time Love's had to play a full game. Full game. And that probably gassed him out a little bit. The defense was really good from him early on. Like he's obviously better than Wilkerson on the inside. The Ozone as a team were really good at perimeter defense without fouling, especially around screens. If guys were setting screens, they were getting past them, staying in the way, staying on the perimeter, making it harder for the Gryphs offense to get situated in the islands, while still avoiding being too close or making too much contact that would give away fouls entering the tramp. Love is so good at stopper. He wasn't able to get in the way of some of those secondary opportunities from Keyshawn Jones, who was just skying over him at points, and some really high games, like high leaps, and some really good secondary opportunities from him. He was getting layups and stuff like that. Keyshawn Jones had a really good game. Keenan Love, like I said though, great stopper, was getting like 5 different bounce kills to end the third quarter, for example. Like, he went out there and stopped 5 different guys trying to get at the basket without getting a stop, without getting any statistic, but getting something that if you're watching the game, you go, right, he's killed 5 different guys' bounces. That's a really effective defensive possession to force a shot clock at the end of the quarter. So really good from Keenan Love, really good up perimeter defense. The Griffins' defense in this game, slightly different. They are the team that has looked at the idea of putting multiple guys on the island way more than any other team. So defensively, most teams just sort of run strong perimeter defense and then the stopper handling things under the basket. But as we've talked about, a lot of the offense in modern SlamBall is coming from passes off of the island area. And if you can disrupt or make that a little bit uncomfortable and make getting passes off around the sides harder, that could be a really effective defensive strategy. We've just not seen it used perfectly yet. And the Gryphs were doing really well here. In some situations, they had 2 guys on the island plus Wilkerson on stopper, 1 person on the perimeter. So you're letting them get to, I would guess you're letting them get to the island. And then you're letting 1 guy play perimeter defense up at the top tramp. I would need to rewatch the game footage to work out this is exactly what they were doing with that 3rd guy. But you're playing defense up the top tramp so that a cut from there isn't possible. And then you've got 1 guy on either side of the person on the island just getting in the passing lanes for any passes that are coming low to guys cutting baseline or through the side tramps. So I like the strategy. I want to see more of it. I want the Griffins to make the playoffs so I can see more of it. And this win over the Ozone is a good step in that direction. Will it be enough to maintain them going forward? I don't know, but you'd like to see Connor Hollenbeck come back to really help this defense, but I like that they are trying this, and I like seeing it because it was a strategy I thought could be effective, and to see it in practice, you go, yeah, that could be effective, but you still need to get in the way on the perimeter. The thing is, the Ozone could have got way more points if they sold contact more on that island area, because the Gryphs are being physical with it. They're getting in the way, they're standing in the way, their bodies are right up against the guy with the ball. And in some games, for example, the Mobs will throw their body into that, and they were doing that in the main event matchup too. They'll throw their bodies into that defensive set and force the referees to make a decision on, is that a foul, is that not a foul? Is that a flop? In which case it's a turnover. But they're at least creating the doubt in the referee's mind. For the Ozone, they weren't taking advantage of that nearly as much as teams like the Mob do. They were just trying to score and play their offense rather than get these cheap bonus points. But to win games sometimes, that's what you've got to do, especially if it's close like this. That could have got them a lot of points in bonus action if they were selling stuff like that. Let's go to the end game, the late game breakdown. Like I say, Ozone are down 70 to 66, and then they get an offensive possession, and Keenan Love brings it up for them. They've got 4 guys in the half court, and they look like they have no idea what they want to run to try and score. McGee gets into the tramps. He gets onto the island, Keith McGee. Arguably, maybe you just want him to go at a stopper like Wilkerson and just try and make a play on him. But he gets onto the island. Bryan Bell-Anderson tries to cut in from the side, I believe it was, and he gets contact on the perimeter. It looked clean. It looked like he was trying to get a call there. So back to what I was saying earlier about you can get bonus points off of stuff like that. He looked to me like he was maybe trying to emphasize it for the referees to call, and they didn't. So arguably there's a foul there. Maybe it's not a foul. Maybe that's referee's discretion. Up to you to watch. They end up with 3 guys all in the top tramp at the same time because BBA readjusts and Q Cotton, I think it was, gets in there, and Keith McGee has to reset, so he takes a bounce down to the bottom tramp. And basically just they lose it completely. The 2 Griffins on the island, I think it's Keyshawn Jones gets a strip on Keith McGee, which creates a loose ball that the Gryphs end up taking with 33 seconds left. On that play, Keyshawn Jones gets like the wind knocked out of him while trying to go for the loose ball. So the Griffins call a timeout so that he can get checked on. But also they can decide how they want to play the last bit of game time. In that timeout, they cut to Trevor Anderson, head coach of the Ozone. And he basically says, like, he breaks down to them, this is what we're going to do. Play high defensively. And as soon as it hits 20 seconds, go for a make it, break it. Which they do. We talked about it didn't come off the way they wanted it to. But that was the right idea, especially when with 33.6 seconds left, the Gryphs take like 16 seconds to move, never mind do a play. And that's an interesting thing on... because the guy who was inbounding the ball, because in SlamBall, the inbound doesn't need to be like a pass. You just get handed the ball at the side of the court, and you can either dribble it or you can make a pass. But in SlamBall, you can't hit the guy defensively until they've dribbled the ball once, right? So what happens is, the guy who's inbounding the ball, he just stood there for 15 seconds and ate up a bunch of time because the defense can't go at him, they can't foul him, they can't hit him until he dribbles the ball. And maybe that's in basketball, the inbound play at the sides or at the baseline. Excuse me, so tired. Those plays, the offensive player has 5 seconds to do something with the ball. And maybe that's something you could implement into SlamBall, is like a time limit on those like inbound plays before the guy with the ball has to either pass it or dribble. Because that was sad to see. The lava thing earlier where they took 20 seconds to do nothing, that was shambolic to see. This was sad to see because the Ozone would love to have made this more competitive. And the Gryphs played within the rules to do something that basically just cut out half of the time that the Gryphs would have had, that the Ozone would have had. So credit to them, but it wasn't fun to see that be how it went. They foul, and then we talked about that earlier. Cotton, unfortunately, with a poor defensive effort. I'm still getting, like, I need to look up the rules because I don't think he did anything wrong, but they called it on him. And then Holmes, 14 for 14 on the season, with another face-off that just totally put it out of reach for them. And then we had the main event. Main event matchup, it was Mob versus Griffins. The Griffins, like I said earlier, had previously held the Mob to their lowest score of 43 and lowest point differential of 13 points when they lost them 43-30 in a game much earlier this season. This one, however, a 30-point win for the Mob. Gage Smith ends the game with 13 stops and I think 12 points, along with 8 LBRs. It might have been less than 8 LBRs. I didn't write down the specific stats because I was like, I don't want this to be entirely another Gage Smith talk about because I think fans at some point will get tired. I'm getting tired of talking about it. Not in a bad way. Like, he's still super exciting to watch. And he's the best player in the league. And the way he plays is incredible. But I just don't like that every episode feels like I'm coming out and going, and Gage Smith played phenomenally. But he did. I think it might have been 6 LBRs when I was checking the box score late in the game. So something around that. Not double digits. It wasn't another triple-double, but it was still close. Those stats, so the 13 stops that he got, which is one less than the record for the season, also held by Gage Smith at 14. I think there were some old school games where guys like Dion Mays maybe got like 16 stops. So I could be wrong about that, but so I don't think this is the highest all time, but he was close to that. And none of that accounts for his disruption in the bottom tramp. Like I said, Keenan Love was getting a lot of those really good ones early on for the Ozone, like disrupting the bounce of the offensive players in the bottom tramp. And the way that the game's recorded in the box score and stuff, there isn't like details on how many times a guy does that. And Gage does it all the time. That is his biggest skill, is disrupting play in the bottom tramp, which is why I was saying earlier with the lava strategy, going from the side tramps to the top tramp and just at him directly and making him have to get physical in the air is a lot better than him just totally throwing off your bounce in the bottom tramp and then playing just fun. Like, for a defense nerd like me, fun to watch basketball style defense in that bottom tramp where it's chest up, arms out, not making contact, just forcing the guy to go one direction and staying in front of him and then getting back off of the tramp so that you can get back in for if there's a cut, right? And so that's just great offense. Keyshawn Jones, who is like the leading scorer for the Gryphs and their biggest punch guy, and if Justin Holmes is their like clutch guy, Keyshawn Jones is the guy that keeps them in games by just scoring a bunch. And he got totally shut out in the first quarter. He had 5 rim attacks, which is like either a layup or a dunk attempt, and missed all of them or were blocked or stopped. The first half highlights was just blocks of Gage Smith blocking Keyshawn Jones. And so If your best offensive weapon can't get past the stopper on the other team, that's a problem for your offense if you're not looking for other options. He ended the game with 12 points, which was the highest on the team, tied with Adam Stanford. And then your second best scorer was Justin Holmes with 3 points and 3 assists. We've talked before about, I think that the key number for wins is if you've got 3 guys in double digit scoring, or at least one guy scoring close to 30, and two in 12 points, and the next best being 3 is not good enough. And just shows, again, the perimeter defense of the Mob is underrated, and the internal defense of Gage Smith is just phenomenal. So really, really tough. Especially tough when, like I said in the previous game, Matthew Wilkerson is not an amazing stopper. He is good he is good, right? I'll end it at that because I was going to be a bit more harsh. He is good. Again, anyone taking part in this sport, I will give you the caveat that I feel like I give every episode because I don't want people to get mad at me thinking I'm saying I can do this better than them. Anyone doing this sport is better than I've been at anything in my life, right? They are better at SlamBall than I've been at anything in my life. But grading on the curve of watching SlamBall, Matthew Wilkerson was letting in a lot of points from single cuts and even from drives, just one-on-one drives. He was letting a lot in because he's got a lot of decisions to make on the defensive end. I've said it before, I was saying it earlier talking about the lava, and this is, the people I'm talking about here are Taekwon Scott and Faisal Shafat, and to a lesser extent maybe Amir Smith on the slashers. To beat the Mob, at minimum, the starting building block of that is a stopper who stops 100% of drives and like 90% of single cuts. And then if they get mesmerized by other stuff, that's okay. You just need to rely on perimeter defense to stop it getting more than that, right? And Matthew Wilkerson was letting in drives, like a lot of just straight drives from guys like Darius Clark jumping over him. So, not good when he's letting in, right? Both teams had the same number of rim attacks against them, right? So 27 rim attacks from both teams. That's an attempt at a dunk or a layup. And the Gryphs let in 20 of 27, comparing to the Mob, who let in 9 of 27. Right? And some of those were garbage time minutes when Gage Smith was taken off the court and they put in Deontay Bird, who is a fine stopper, but if I'm doing a tier list, he's very low down on that, right? He's very low down on that. But he's also one of the, he doesn't always need to play that. But the point is, Wilkerson is not a good enough stopper to beat the Mob, is the thing. He's not anywhere near as good as Gage Smith, who I would like to draw attention to the nickname that John Schriffen was trying to get over on the call, which is the Eraser. But then they were also talking about the Mob just call him Clark Kent because he's Superman on the SlamBall court and he's just a regular dude off of it. I'm actually going to throw up a poll here on YouTube, but also on my Twitter and also on Spotify, because you can do polls on Spotify, and just ask you guys, what is a better nickname for Gage Smith? Is it the Eraser or is it Clark Kent? And just, for all of the American listenership and viewership, because I know that's the majority of what I get, just for your benefit, an Eraser over here in the UK, we just call it a rubber, which is also, I know what you guys call condoms, so I don't think that's what you want to call him. Although he's great protection. But there you go. There's some UK wording for you, right? The other thing that you need to beat the Mob, right, is to disrupt their options off of those cuts around the island, right? They can beat you with straight on drives, but again, if you've got a good enough stopper, that's just impossible for them to do. What they are excelling at is obviously the cuts off that central island and being able to reset a play and still go with more cuts again. And in order to beat them, you need to disrupt the play that they've got on the island, right? And in putting 2 guys on the island, the Gryphs are doing that. The problem is you sometimes give away fouls, especially if you're standing. So offensively, the guy with the ball can't stand on the bits of padding that aren't the island, which is in the middle of all 4 tramps, but there's other bits of padding that connect the tramps. The only person that can't stand on that is the guy with the ball. Anyone else can stand on those little strips, right? There's no call against that. The problem with doing it defensively, as was shown in this game, is there's not enough time to get out of the way of an offensive player that's driving in from the wing. So Darius Clark drove in from the side tramp, and just wiped out a Gryphons player, and that's a foul on the Gryphons because they didn't make an effort to get out of the way. I believe that the Mob have to make an effort to get out of the way in that situation as well. You can't just run through a defender. The thing is, the thing that I'm drawing that knowledge from is a bit in the rulebook, which I think is specifically about perimeter defense. So if you're driving in on the offense, right, if you're making a cut towards the basket, the defense doesn't have to get out of your way. They can't move into your way, but if they're stood still, the offensive player has to make the effort to get around them, right? You can't just go through them and then get a foul call. You have to try and get around them. I don't know if it's the same with this island strategy that the Gryphs have come up with, because I don't even know if that was a concept prior to the season actually going underway, and so they haven't updated the rulebook accordingly. Who's responsible for that hit when you get inside the tramps? I am not sure. The thing is, because they then started to give away some bonus points, they got a little bit less aggressive. And if you get less aggressive in and around the island, disrupting those passes or just making the guy reconsider the play that they want to do from the island, then you need to be much better on the perimeter. You need to increase your perimeter defense. And I'm not sure they were doing that. It felt like they were giving away perimeter entry like way more. And that wasn't great for the Gryphs. An interesting thing that came out of this, though, is that the Mob ended up playing that same style of defense for some half-court possessions. And the thing I specifically want to draw attention to was, I think it was Cam Horton. It might have been someone else. It might have been Hollins. It might have been Holloway. They were going up behind the guy on the island, right? So the guy on the island's only got 3 seconds to stand there, and then they have to get off or make a pass or make a play of some sort, right? I think it was whoever it was, I'll say it was Horton just so I'm not saying loads of names. Horton was coming up behind the guy, right? And putting his body here so that this was off of like an inbound play. So the Gryphons player with the ball was forced to look to the left side of the tramps from their perspective, right? They're forced to look this way. So they can't see anything that's going over their left shoulder because the defender is stopping them from going that way, right? Which forces them to have to make a play going in a different direction. Now, the defensive guy on the island can stay there as long as he wants. The offensive guy's only got 3 seconds. So what happens? The defensive guy takes a step back when they know that the 3 seconds is almost up. They kind of leapt back to the other end of the island because they know that if there's only 3 seconds left, the offensive guy has to make a decision. And what would be a good decision? Jumping into the defender and getting a foul call made, right? So if you leap backwards, that doesn't put any opportunity to do that for the referees to have to make a call. But you're also forcing the play to go in one direction, which allows your stopper to only worry about that direction. And then instead of potentially 3 guys, at maximum, they're only worried about 2. Because it's the guy on the island and the guy who's coming in from that left side tramp. So that's, again, the Mob's defense outside of Gage Smith is kind of underrated and is a big part of why they're doing so well. And I wanted to draw attention to that because that's not what the Gryphons are doing. The Gryphons are just trying to disrupt any sort of pass. This was an interesting way of doing it, and I really liked it. Again, a team like the Mob will exploit you if you try and do that to them, because they won't wait for the 3 seconds before they jump into the defender. They'll try and do everything quick so that the referee doesn't have time to breathe, and they've just got to make a decision. But I liked that strategy from the Gryphons. Obviously, like I say, their defensive strength wasn't enough to get in the way of the Mob, and Gage Smith and this perimeter defense from the Mob is just too good to get past right now. This is day 1 of the last weekend before we then go into playoffs. The Mob have clinched first place. I don't think that anyone's going to catch... obviously, I don't think anyone's going to beat them regular season, and then when it comes to the playoffs, I just highly doubt that... they're going to get beaten. I think this is Brendan Kirsch, who never won a trophy. He's head coach. He has never won a trophy in a full season of SlamBall. The Mob have 4 championships to their name. Kirsch was only there for one of those championships, and it was the first China series, which was played with only 4 teams. So you're not facing as many varied opponents. I think this is him trying to prove a point and be like, I am the best SlamBall coach of all time. And just dominate and win. So they want a championship. Other teams want to shut them up at this stage and prove me and any fan wrong that keeps talking about them. And credit to all those other teams for doing that. So I'm excited. I'm excited for the rest of this weekend. A note from the league, actually, because this was on the broadcast last night, and I was really struggling to work out who is where in terms of like, are they through? Are they in the playoffs for sure? What's going on with this stuff? And it was confirmed on the broadcast last night that obviously the Mob have clinched the first seed. And then the Buzz and the Wrath have both clinched playoff positioning, right? So they're not stuck in second and third seed as they are now, but they are for sure going to be in the playoffs. Interestingly, the Slashers, who are in fourth, have not clinched, and they play the Wrath tonight. So tonight's matchups are, what the hell? Why is it looking like that? Oh, I see what they're doing here. Tonight's matchups are Slashers versus Wrath at 7:30 Pacific time, which for me is 3:30 a.m. Hurrah! I finish work at 10 p.m. tonight as well, so that's a quick turnaround. Slashers versus Wrath, which should be a really great game. The Wrath would like to win out. If the Wrath win out tonight, they would be tied with the Buzz and potentially get that second seed, which would get them a bye in the first round of the playoffs. Slashers are going to be a hard team to beat, and if the Slashers haven't clinched a playoff berth yet, there is the opportunity that they might, fall out of the running if they start to lose a bunch. That being said, I think if the Slashers win tonight, they have also clinched playoffs by looking at the standings. Because the only team after last night who could potentially beat them is if the Rumble didn't lose this weekend. But I think the Slashers, after the result last night, they have also clinched playoffs, actually. But this is more for like who gets that second seed. Because it's Slashers versus Wrath, and then the next game is Rumble versus Buzzsaw. You would expect the Buzzsaw to cut the Rumble to shreds, right? Defensively, they've just got too much. The Rumble don't have enough offensively, and the Buzzsaw are a competent enough offensive team that the lack of stopper is really going to hurt the Rumble. I'm expecting it to be, I do not know for Slashers versus Wrath. I think Slashers might want to try and prove a point and get a win. But regardless of who wins, they then go up against the Buzzsaw in the main event, I think, which basically means that it's going to be even harder to catch up to them at second seed. If the Rumble somehow beat them Buzz in that second game, you want to be the Wrath. This is now getting complicated with like seeding and stuff like that. But I think the top four teams have all clinched playoffs, right? It just depends where they finish. And I think obviously the Buzz aren't so far ahead that they've clinched second, and the Wrath and Slashers would both quite like to get the rest that a bye would get them in the first round. So exciting game tonight. Exciting games tonight as a Wrath fan technically. As a guy who has learned to appreciate the Buzz better as the season's gone on, and as a guy who loves watching Tony Crosby II play, loves the two-man game with Bradley Laubacher, likes watching a Slashers game, I'm excited for tonight's matchups. Then Saturday, we'll get into all the Saturday and Sunday stuff on tomorrow's episode, where we will be recapping tonight's matchups. But this has been Bounce Off, the #1 SlamBall podcast worldwide. 43 minutes. Is that our shortest episode so far? It is not, because some of the interviews have gone shorter. Is this the shortest one where I've just been talking to myself? I can yak for days. One last thing, actually, before we get out of here. I wanted to point this out. I am going to put this on Twitter as well. The league has confirmed playoff seeding tiebreakers. So we've known for a while that it was win percentage was the main thing, and then main events 1 was the second tiebreak, right? They have not extrapolated further as to what any additional tiebreaks could be, and I did ask them about this a while ago, but it's just not something I followed up with profusely, so apologies for that. But they did reveal it in an article in previewing this weekend, and basically it's win percentage, main events 1, and then a head-to-head win percentage between teams, and then if that still doesn't separate them, it's point differential overall. So those are the 4 categories that separate playoff seeding, right? But we're not onto that yet. For now, that's night 1 of weekend 4, the last weekend of SlamBall action in this new season done. Tonight is night 2, Slashers versus Wrath at 3:30 a.m. UK time, 7:30 Pacific time, and then Rumble versus Buzzsaw in the second matchup of the night. Excited for that, excited for the main event, excited to talk about SlamBall tomorrow. Have a great rest of your, what day is this today? Friday, my God.